Okay, approaching quality management differently. So what do I mean by that? So hopefully in the next sort of 40 minutes, I'll try and explain what I mean by that. This presentation really is really quite a high level summary of the contents of an 18 module curriculum that's part of my company's quality organization transformation package. And hopefully after the end of this session, you'll understand what I mean by managing quality differently and looking at quality management in a different way, and the benefits for not only your patients and your customers, but actually for your overall business. Now, the content of this presentation is actually aligned with the contents of the recent book, Transforming Quality Organizations, A Practical Guide, which came out in April 2023. It does, however, contain additional material and a lot of material that simply didn't get into the book for reasons of space. And it also covers in much more detail how to practically apply some of the thinking described in the book. So it's not a prerequisite for this session to actually, or this course to actually have purchased or read the book, but it obviously will help in terms of understanding some of the content which I'll cover. I will also actually cover some of the outputs of the quality management assessment tool. So basically in terms of how you identify some gaps in your quality system and remediate them with improvement plans. If you haven't run the tool before, I encourage you to do so. You'll get a full web report of your organization, a full 87-page PDF report with quite a detailed summary of where you are and where you could go in terms of your quality system. So if you haven't done so, I encourage you to complete the assessment. It's just follow the link below on the screen. It is completely free for a limited period only. So now's the time to actually go to the site and run your own report. We will be talking about the different levels of maturity in terms of the maturity model, and how you can progress through that maturity model, obviously by implemented improvements and enhancements to your quality system. So we will touch on that in subsequent slides. And this is actually integrated within the course as a theme. This is the current course content. It's about 18 modules, but we're continually adding content in terms of new material that becomes available, and then obviously any material that the individuals want us to cover, we will actually add to this library of material. So it's currently an 18 session module, but that will grow and it will change over time. So it will be enhanced as we progress. So putting your customers central to the quality system. A lot of organisations talk about, oh yes, we must put the customers central to our organisation. But what do we mean by that? And when we do that, how does it force us to sort of look at quality management in a different way? And really, we'll come on to what are the benefits of actually rebalancing the quality system and actually looking at the QMS in a slightly different light. So we'll cover some of these. Now, the approaches that I'll cover in this deck were actually honed over 20 years of basically applying it in companies large and small, generally medical device companies. So myself and my co-author Ian Wells have spent the last couple of decades working with a range of organisations in the medical device sector and the healthcare sector. And by applying the methodology we'll cover in the subsequent slides, we really have significantly improved KPIs within those organisations. So this methodology has got a proven track record in terms of implementation, and some of the KPIs that it's sort of moved in terms of moving the dial in terms of cutting product recall rates by 50%, by half, speeding up new product development by 50% in terms of accelerating your time to market. Obviously, significant costs in quality system execution, just the maintenance of the whole quality system, as we've seen improvements, and really, obviously the customer improvements in customer satisfaction in terms of their feedback and complaints. That's a significant output of some of the methodology we'll actually describe. So, it really starts and ends with patients like you and me. So if you're a healthcare company, your patient is obviously central to your product and your offering. So in terms of, how good are healthcare organizations at delivering value and satisfying the patients? like you and me. And there are times when the healthcare sector is really, really good. And so a really good example is the latest or the recent pandemic. So currently, nearly 70% of the world's population have had at least one dose of the COVID vaccine. And nearly sort of like 13 billion doses have been administered to date. So, virtually, a large proportion of the world has been vaccinated from essentially a standing start a couple of years ago. So this really shows that healthcare systems, organizations, manufacturers, regulators, it can work in a joined up fashion to actually deliver value and benefit to patients in a very short space of time. So when we need to, the healthcare sector can actually sort of get its act together and deliver value. However, it can also the other side of the coin is there's been lots of examples where there's been health scares with products that are defective in terms of the safety profile of those products. So over the last 5-10 years, there's been a number of them in the press. And in recent years, there's been a real focus, especially in Europe, in terms of enhancing the regulations in terms of in vitro diagnostics and medical devices. So there's been an increased sort of surveillance in terms of the regulatory requirements that those products have to meet to get to market. And this has had a knock-on effect in terms of some recent data supports that 1 in 5 products are expected to be removed from the market in the next 5 years. And the reason for this is the regulatory challenges are actually too great in order to pass the regulatory requirements. Versus the benefit of and obviously the sales of the device. And it's been reported 1 in 10 companies are actually even halting all innovation activity completely. So this enhanced regulation is obviously a reaction to the safety issues over the past sort of 5-10 years. But it's sort of we're beginning to sense now it's come at a cost in terms of its impact to the sector in terms of the availability of products. Now, probably about 6 months ago, I ran a poll on LinkedIn in terms of I asked quality professionals the question over the last few years in the medical device industry, has there been more focus on meeting regulations than meeting patient needs? And really the response was overwhelming. There was a general feeling that the regulatory environment had got all the limelight, and actually patient needs had sort of lost out in terms of that sort of conversation. But I mean, the fact is that healthcare companies need to do both. They need to meet regulations because it's the law, and obviously it's meet patient needs. So really, this discussion in the next few slides really is a conversation of how you balance those two often competing attributes in terms of customer delivery. Now, I just want to tap my stall up here and say basically this is not a criticism of regulations. So regulations are very important. They help ensure consistency and help ensure products are safe. So they are vital in any healthcare system. This is more a discussion of how you balance resources and effort appropriately in terms of not only meeting the regulations, but the other requirements you have of your business. But the fact is, a product that's compliant may not necessarily be good. It could be a very compliant, poor product. And essentially, quality and compliance are not the same things. Very often, they're talked of in the same sentence, but they are very different attributes in terms of what they're actually trying to deliver. Now, so you've got regulators and the regulations on one hand, and you've got the patient and the customer on another. But there's another sort of seat at the table in terms of another group that your quality organisation and your quality system has to satisfy, and that is obviously business health. And by that I mean the financials. So basically, businesses need to make money. They need to be profitable to grow. Shareholders need to meet their expectations, and generally the conversation isn't always around profitability when we talk about quality and we talk about regulations and regulatory control. But it's an important voice, and it's a voice that's really it needs to be heard. So we've got to accept that the quality system comes with a resource load on the organisation and its ability to make to enhance the profitability, but also impact the profitability of an organisation. Now, there are challenges that are very specific to now. We talk about this balance between innovation and control. So we talked about it recently in terms of the regulations potentially suppressing innovation within organisations, but the requirement for regulations to sort of control and ensure the safety of products. Overlaid with this, there's the general narrative of the healthcare systems generally today are coming under huge amounts of strain, and it's not just the UK or Europe; it's worldwide. So this is a great book by Sanchez Serrano, where it basically virtually every healthcare system in the world is feeling the pressure and the stress of the current environment. So it's not just a UK or Europe thing, and it's a real essentially a crisis across the world of how you deliver healthcare to your population in a cost effective manner. The other challenges that are very specific to now is a still skills gap. So essentially, healthcare organisations like yourself have to compete with you have to compete with talent. You have to compete with individuals who want to work with you that will grow and nurture your company. There's also challenges that are very specific to now in terms of we're going through a lot of technological advance in the world. There's recently there's great interest in AI, machine learning. So the technological landscape now is far different than it was sort of 10 years ago, even a couple of years ago. So all of these combined really sort of paint the picture that really quality organizations and quality systems need to be more effective and efficient and impactful than they ever have been. And now the challenge is on quality organizations, and this is the narrative I will sort of explore, is they really have to start behaving differently and start looking at quality in a different way, and how they see the world and their benefit to organizations. So really quality organizations are coming under very different strain than they did, historically in sort of, the 50s and 60s, where a lot of the quality management was sort of built up from very, very under Turing and Duran Deming in those sort of concepts. It's really moved on from there, and there's a requirement, I think, for the quality organizations to rethink how they deliver to organizations. So really, the question obviously is, who are your customers? So if I ask you, who does your quality organisation and your QMS need to satisfy? So we've essentially explored that in the previous slide. So really, in my view, there are three main customer groups that your organisation has to sort of satisfy to be truly effective. It's obviously regulatory compliance. It's obviously the customer experience, which is the patients and the end users of your product, and then this third group, this sort of a very often underrepresented group, business health. This is the financials. This is the balance sheet. This is the profit and loss. This is your company going to be sustainable and grow? So in summary, regulations, you've got to obey the law. You've got to adhere to the standards that are applicable to products. The customers need their expectations need to be met in terms of quality, cost, safety, and delivery. And your business needs to be profitable. And your QMS and your quality organisation has huge influence on all of these three areas. So really, this course is really going to help organizations, or try to help organizations, make this balance between these very often competing requirements for these three different customer groups. Now, in terms of customers, they are true customers, and the definition of a true customer is the customer can go somewhere else. They can take their business elsewhere. So the regulators can refuse to approve your quality system. Customers can buy their products and material from other suppliers. So hospitals can buy from other companies. And obviously, shareholders can invest in other businesses. They can withdraw their money and invest in other companies. So really, these three groups really are true customers in the real sense, in that they can actually take their money and go somewhere else. So really, I mean, your quality system needs to be balanced, and this is the narrative that we'll explore in terms of, being compliant is an attribute that simply the customer expects now. It's not going to differentiate you in the market. When you buy a new car, you don't buy a new car because it meets all the safety regulations for electrical safety. That's not a selling point in the car. That you expect the car to have that as a basic. So basically, quality organisations, I think we need to ask themselves what their true purpose is. Is it beyond ensuring compliance? Obviously compliance is important, but do you want your role in the organisation to be the police handing out speeding tickets, or actually the individual that starts helping build more beautiful cars? Now, my personal strong view is the latter, and really this narrative in the subsequent slides is how we sort of, in many ways, recenter the quality systems to ensure it's compliant, but also we're actually adding value to our organisations. So a quick bit of background. I set the company up in 2019 really to help organisations rebalance their quality systems and their organisations to meet these sort of three customer groups. DATOD is the Welsh word for unravel, and our mission is to be the go-to partner for medical device companies who want to transform their quality organisations. So not just improve them, completely transform them to better serve their patients and grow the business. So really, it's the focus on the patients, but it's also the focus on making your business sustainable and to grow. So, so the subsequent slides really that's a great mission and very very laudable. Is how do you do that, and how do we help organisations move in that direction? Now, in terms of tools we use to build a more customer-centric quality system, I'll talk a lot about a lot of the methodology that's been applied in manufacturing for many years in terms of lean methodology. It's used less in the quality arena, and certainly within quality systems. But really, it's quite key in terms of understanding what's your customer's perception of value, and how you deliver that value. And the general message is, work out what your customer defines as important, and then work relentlessly to deliver that to the customer. That's the general message. And in terms of, it's the customer that decides what's important, not what you think is important, and they really decide whether you're doing that effectively or not. So really, the customer is central to your quality system and quality organisation, in that it's a constant reference point to go back and are you delivering what they want in the way that they want. So it's not you deciding that; it's actually your customer groups. As we'll come on to, this will force you to look at the quality system and subsystems of the quality system in multiple perspectives. And this is the narrative. You look at the same thing with sort of different hats on, in terms of whether you are one of those three customer groups in terms of regulatory, customer experience, or the financials. Again, it's all about perspective. We don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. So the perspective of the customer is really important in terms of how they see your quality organization. Now, the expectations of the three groups really are different. Basically, regulatory compliance, they want you to comply with the law. It's as simple as that. So basically, there's a quite one-dimensional. This is the law, and you have to obey it. Customer experience is all about satisfaction and safety, and are you delivering to the customer in terms of what they want? And then business health, it's all around money, it's cost. Are you cost effective in terms of a business? And you can see these three groups are actually in potential conflict. Compliance and cost may be in conflict, and really what the course will help you do is how you balance this conflict, and how you make sure that all of these groups, which are equally valid, are actually getting their are being satisfied in terms of your quality system or quality organization. So I talked about lean thinking, and lean thinking really sort of originated from Toyota in manufacturing, and it really has transformed excuse me, the efficiency of modern manufacturing plants. It arose in Japan, and it spread throughout the world in terms of its ability to make manufacturing plants really deliver to the customer, and to make product flow, and to reduce waste. And what my company does is we basically leverage a lot of that lean thinking as it applies to the transactional processes of the quality system. So obviously the QMS isn't making anything physical. It may make a document or say, but essentially it's a transactional flow of data. But you can overlay a lot of the thinking around lean onto the transactional process of the quality system, and use the power of lean thinking to actually improve the effectiveness and the efficiency of the quality system. And again, it's about putting the quality system the customers central to your thinking in terms of how you approach the QMS. And it's all about removing waste from the quality system and making it flow. So there's a lot around in the course around waste reduction within the quality system. So in terms of lean thinking, there are generally considered 8 wastes: defects, inventory, waiting, overproduction, motion, over processing, transport, and talent. So I won't go through these in detail, but there's quite a lot of detailed guidance within the course in terms of how you look at the quality system and apply this methodology to remove waste. And again, this waste is preventing you satisfying your customers. So it's preventing your quality organization and your QMS from actually sort of satisfying their customers. And really, it's preventing your quality system from being effective. And really, the narrative really is to work tirelessly to remove that sort of waste from your transactional processes within your quality system, because it's preventing you delivering to your customer. There's a section in the course on how you develop better metrics, better KPIs, really true metrics that are measuring things that the customer feels is important. So there's a lot of focus in terms of measuring things that the customer sees as valuable, and there's a real connection between your quality organization delivering value to the customer. So there's a lot of discussion of making sure that you're moving in the right direction, because very often moving in the right direction is more important than having metrics that are not valuable at all. So if you need to define a metric that's valuable and actually move it in the right direction, obviously the speed of direction is important, but generally it's better to move in the right direction than not. And basically slow progress over time is more effective than setting a goal that's unachievable. So I see many organizations that set metrics and targets that are really quite unachievable, and very often they're actually de-linked from what the customer sees as value. Again, they has to be connected to what the customer sees as important. And there's lots of mechanics of the quality system which people measure, which actually have nothing to do with what the customer would not consider them to be important. The number of CAPAs, the number of non-conformants, the number of change orders. The customer really doesn't care about that. What the customer cares about is the quality of your product. So real metrics are they complaining? Are there field actions? In terms of the regulator, are you fixing internal deficiencies in terms of your audits in a timely manner? Business, what's your scrap level? In terms of the QMS execution, are you solving problems on time? Are you getting to the right fixes? And are these fixes working? So, using the methodology that we'll cover in the course, we can drill down to metrics that are really, really clearer in terms of their connection to delivering value to the customer, and hopefully these dashboards with scores and scores of metrics, we can boil them down to things that are really, really important to your customer, because this will drive how you measure whether you're moving in the right direction over time in terms of delivering value to your 3 customer groups. Now, as I said, lean thinking has been around for many years, and there are some drawbacks in it. Basically, it's never really sort of hasn't delivered its full potential within healthcare organisations, and there's a number of publications that discuss why that could be so. But one of the main reasons is organisations are not machines. They're not production lines. They don't have inputs and outputs you can control and verify. They're complex, changing, and involving systems, and they're not machines. And there's a general movement now that the quality system and the certainly quality organisations and organisations per se are actually complex, adaptive systems, and I'll explore what I mean by that in a few minutes. And this really drives you to you need to apply newer thinking around the quality systems and really how organizations actually behave in order to improve them, because they are, as I said, they're not necessarily the machines that we would like them to be when we apply some of this production methodology to try to improve them. And obviously, improving everything, you can have to do some sort of change. So we cover a lot in terms of how you manage change of the QMS. as I said, people don't behave like machines, however much we want them to. Um, but it does require you to start with a plan, and we'll cover how you build a plan and how you build a roadmap, and how you modify that roadmap. So a lot of the thinking around, historically, how you manage change in terms of you diagnose the problem and you put a plan together and you march forward, making change. Really, that's sort of changing now in terms of, plans change, the whole system's moving. So basically, it's more of a dialogue in terms of, and there's no beginning and end to the plan. Parts of the plan are uncertain. It will derive a different leadership style. So this emergent change, which happens in all organisations, there's a lot of guidance in the course in terms of how you deal with that as a leader and as an individual who wants to change your quality organisation and quality system. So I talked about, quality systems are seen as complex adaptive systems. So what do you mean by complexity? What is complexity? Well, essentially, complex systems are changing, evolving, and hard to predict. So they're not nice. They're constantly moving. So you think of shoals of fish and economies and crowds, and there are other things which you behave in this very sort of fluid way. One consequence of that is that the relationship between cause and effect doesn't always hold. And obviously, this is the basis of root cause analysis and a lot of the methodology within production in terms of you can get to root cause. But in a complex environment, this doesn't always happen. And there's a general movement, and now that quality organisations and the quality system is a complex system. It is a moving, evolving system. It's a constantly changing system. Now, what do I mean by complexity versus complicated? And it's really easy to confuse the two out. These two words. So, as an example, a car key, or certainly a car key from say 10 years ago, it would be considered simple. You put it in the lock, you turn it, you open the door. It's very simple. You understand it. The relationship between cause and effect is very, very clear. Now the car is obviously a step up from that. It's very complicated. It's got lots of moving parts, but you can actually but it is predictable. You can understand how it works, so it doesn't behave in strange ways. If you press the brake pedal, it slows down, and you press the window button, then and the window will open. So basically, even though it's very intricate, you can understand it. It's very complicated, but the relationship between cause and effect still holds, though you may have to do some experimentation to understand how that works. Now, this differs from complexity in it's very difficult at times to understand how the system is behaving. It's constantly changing and it's very unpredictable. So an example of that would be traffic, how traffic behaves, how motorways merge. And if you've ever been in a traffic jam that's suddenly come from nowhere, then suddenly disappeared, why has that happened? It's because the system is evolving and changing, and this is what we mean by complexity in terms of how it manifests itself in our real world. And that in our real world, there are things that are simple, and there are things that are complicated, and there are things that are complex. So this is not. You have to pick one of them. Very often in the same scenario, and we'll come on to that. All of these three can be happening at the same time. So in terms of quality systems and being complex adaptive systems, one great example of a complex adaptive system is an ecosystem. So this pond, has got different flowers. They bloom at different times. Different things evolve. The environment impacts the nature of the pond, the season. So it's constantly moving. You can only look at it as one snapshot in time, but it is actually continually changing. And one of the consequences of that is you have to treat the quality system a different way than you do historically with manufacturing systems, and really treat them as they are, changing beasts. So how quality systems behave, these are the attributes from the literature in terms of how they behave. They're systemic, so they are systems, and we have a quality system. They're path dependent. What that means is they've got a history and they're moving and changing to something else. And that history obviously influences where they are now and obviously influences where they're going to go. They're sensitive to context and change. Change can emerge very quickly from apparently nothing, so it can go through a lot of change, and it can go through change that's very episodic. So it can be stable for quite a length of time, and then it can suddenly go through a change event that creates something completely different. And there are different stressors that sort of make that happen. So an example of the quality system and stressors that make it go through episodic change would be technology. So the software as a service, and all of the QMS that's coming now, that's driving some episodic change within quality organizations. It's been stable for a number of years, and something new comes along, and then it goes through a rapid burst of change. Now, because the QMS is at times, not always, but at times it's a complex system, this is the reason that you haven't managed to get complete control over your quality system and quality organization over time. So I've not met an organization which has driven their non-conformance rate down to zero, where their complaint rates have been completely eliminated, where human errors have been completely removed, despite thousands of hours of CAPA and investigation and effort and endeavor. This has never really happened. The reason for that is just that systems are complex and moving and constantly changing. So you can put a fix in one area, and then the system changes, and then you get another error that manifests itself in a different way. And one of the concepts of complex systems is often there is no such thing as root cause. A lot of the methodology within Lean is you can get to root cause, but one of the behaviors of complex systems, and it's sometimes difficult to grapple with and accept, is very often there is no such thing as root cause, because the relationship between cause and effect is at times broken. That doesn't mean that it always happens and your QMS is always like that. That's not the case at all, and we come on to that. But when it's behaving in this complex manner, it is actually very difficult to actually drive down to root cause. So really, the narrative really is, if we need to supplement our approach with something different. It's not a case of that we've been doing, we haven't worked hard enough, and there's been many years of endeavour to apply, CAPA and root cause investigation and change. It's not for the want of effort. It's really for applying the wrong effort in potentially the wrong way. Now, in the course, we'll explore this further, and there's lots of great material out there in terms of how you apply complexity thinking within organisations, and certainly in the social sciences, it's a real growing movement. Less so in manufacturing and some of the more sort of machine-based so organisations and engineering. But this is really the narrative I'm going to talk in the course, in terms of some of that thinking is really quite valuable in how you manage quality and how you manage quality organisations. Okay, so there's probably some people listening saying, "Oh, this is very woolly, and how does it really help me in practice?" Now, one of the frameworks that's come out of complexity thinking is the Conneffing framework, and it's just a framework of how you see the world, and it's very, very useful in terms of, as I said previously, the world, it doesn't manifest itself in one way at the same time. It can manifest itself in different ways at different times and at the same time. So on this grid, really, in the bottom right, you've got a system where you've got a world that's very, very simple and obvious. So that's the car key world. And above that, you've got a world that's complicated. So you don't fully understand it, and you might have to experiment or get sort of specialist knowledge to understand it. But cause and effect still holds, and you can get to some understanding. On the left-hand side of this grid is you've got the world of complexity, which is constantly changing, and cause effect is potentially broken and not necessarily holding. And in the bottom left, you've got a world where basically it's chaotic. Basically, there's no, everything's completely mad and constantly changing. And in the course, what we'll do is I'll demonstrate you can overlay this framework onto the quality system, and it can drive different behaviours depending on different aspects of the scenario you're investigating. So as one example on this grid, in a world that's very simple and obvious, there are very simple and basic, improvement methodologies that can be applied where you understand cause and effect, and that holds. Things like lean and process excellence. So depending on the scenario, the quality system, the quality organization needs to behave differently, recognizing that different needs and different horses for courses in terms of how you apply your thinking and your approach. And we'll explore this more in the course. One aspect the model really helps is in terms of this tussle between innovation and control. And one of the narratives, and we'll talk about one of the approaches we'll talk about is the requirement for the quality system at times to change how it behaves. So there are times when the quality organization needs to be very hands-on, very controlling, and take a very process approach to how it sort of looks at issues. The other extreme is where it needs to have a very hands-off approach. So an example of that would be new product development. We don't necessarily need the quality organization constraining thinking during the phases of how new product and new offerings to the customer are brainstormed. So really, you need to, at times the quality system needs to take a step back and just let the system come up with the wild and wacky ideas. And then for different scenarios, there's different ways of the quality system needs to behave. So the message here is, as a quality professional, you need to behave in different ways depending on the different contexts, and we'll cover that more fully in the course. Now, to build an organization, to change it, you've got to influence certain things, and three main areas we consider in the course. So there's the three buckets are obviously people and process and technology, and there's obviously overlap between these three areas. But generally, do you have the right people with the right skills and behaviors for now and in the future? That's the question you're asking in terms of people. In terms of process, do you have the right processes focused on meeting your customer needs, and are those processes built around the users of those processes in terms of not just the customer, the actual individuals who have to execute the processes in your organizations. Technology, are you leveraging technology to better serve the customers and patients and grow your business? So there's a section around that in terms of how you apply technology. Now, in the course, we talk about the quality management organizations now and the quality system now. Obviously, things change, and as the world changes and quality organizations change, there is a discussion on the future of the QMS. Now, the future of the QMS will depend on who you ask. So there's lots of been discussion about AI and big data and EQMS and quality 4.0 and digital twins and all of that. But to be honest, a lot of that narrative is actually being driven by vendors of applications who want to sell you those sort of systems, consultants, the media. So it's very often difficult to sort of unpick of what is hype versus what is real prediction of where quality management should go. So what I've incorporated in the course is some sort of a bit more impartial advice and guidance in terms of an exercise that happened in 2019 is one of the inputs in terms of in 2019 a large number of quality professionals got together under the guidance of the Swedish Institute for Quality to look at the themes where quality management was going in the future. And they picked a sort of date line of sort of 10 years ahead in terms of 2030. Where would it head? What were the things that quality organizations need to focus on? And the output of that wasn't necessarily robots and AI and big data and all of that sexy stuff. It was more general themes. The requirement for quality organizations to take a more systems approach. So we've talked about that and looking at going back and appreciating that the QMS is a system. The ability of quality organizations, as we said, to sort of manage this tussle between control and change. Acceptance that the quality organization doesn't sit in a vacuum, and basically it's connected with the end-to-end supply chain and the broader environment. So the impact of your quality organization on broader environmental care and sustainability. The fourth area is more of a philosophical question of why, what is quality? What's its greater purpose in terms of delivery, in terms of trying to articulate that to yourself and your organisation, and this obviously speaks to, what's the culture of quality you want to drive within your organisation and encourage. And so there's a lot of content in the course, and what are the ways you could do that in building a quality culture, because essentially all the material I cover in the course is pretty worthless unless you've actually drive engagement in terms of trying to drive a culture of quality within your business. And the last area, the institute and the group sponsored by the Institute, came up with it was that organisations need to be flexible and more agile than they historically have been, and hence some of the content in this course. So in the course, we will explore each of these areas, and we'll overlay them on top of the technology process and people aspects in terms of what does that mean practically to move your organisation forward. Now, in the course, we'll talk about how do you do that practically? How do you build a transformation map for your quality system and organisation? With accepting that applying basic approaches will only get you so far, but it won't position you for success in the future. So basically, the message is the world is changing, your organisation is changing. How do you set your organisation up for success now, but actually in the future? And obviously, you need a plan, and obviously that plan will change, but there is content in the course of how you build a quality transformation map. So you're mapping out, this year, next year, and subsequent years, what you need in terms of, in this example, it's process, people, and compliance and technology, but what you need now versus what you need in the next couple of years to driving towards this future state of continual improvement and continually, better ways to satisfy the three customers of your quality system. So that's really a summary of the course content, or what we explored in a lot of depth in the subsequent modules. But I'll give you these are some final thoughts from Geoffrey Braithwaite, who is a healthcare professor in the UK. And one of his quotes is that really, complexity science offers ways to change our collective mindset about healthcare systems, enable us to improve performance that is otherwise stagnant. And basically, his message is we need to start behaving and thinking differently in terms of how we deliver healthcare. And for me, that's how we deliver quality. And one quote that resonated with me is, a note of caution goes to the proponents of today's most popular strategies. It's time to stop thickening the rule book, reorganizing the boxes on the organizational chart, and start introducing more key performance indicators and to do something more sophisticated. So a lot of the content within the course is actually supplementing previous thinking approaches with something that's a bit more sophisticated of how the world actually works. So that's really the message hopefully I've got across in this short session. Yeah, and finally, I think as quality professionals, we can do far better at meeting the regulations in a more effective and efficient way. We certainly can do better protecting and delivering value to our patients, and yet certainly in ensuring our businesses are profitable. And in the following sessions, we'll cover these in detail. So just to recap on the course content, this is the current course content. It's about 18 modules. And certain modules will grow, and we'll add extra ones to them. So this is the sort of module content that will be available in sort of April 2023 that we're going to work through. Quick slide on who I am in terms of my background for those interested, and some background on Ian Wells, my co-author of the book. So we've got very similar but often very different sort of experiences, and this is basically a summary of what we're interested in and what our backgrounds are, and why we're doing this and why we feel it's important. If you want to contact me, here's my direct number, here's my email address, and go to the link at my website, and there's lots more information. So hopefully in the future I'll interact with you, and we can explore some of the things we've covered in this material. So thank you for your time. I hope this has been interesting, and hopefully it'd be an exciting journey just to show how, if you can change the way you look at quality in a different way, it can have real powerful impacts for your patient and your business, and also